All right, Algebra 1, quadratic formula, and the discriminant, section 9.5b. We're almost done with chapter 9. This one is a little more practice on the quadratic formula, but now we're going to talk about the discriminant, a certain part of the quadratic formula, and what it does, and it tells us to find the number of solutions. So first thing, what is a discriminant? Discriminant is it's going to tell you how many and what type of solution we have. So remember your answers, you have maybe 0 solutions, maybe 1 solution, or 2 solutions. It'll also tell you what type, that's the how many part, what type, is it irrational or rational. So we have a bunch of options there. The next part, it's part of the quadratic formula under the square root. So it's just the little piece. We'll show you here. See if I bring up the quadratic formula. Okay. So if I bring this over here, we're just talking about this part right here, the b squared minus 4ac, not even the square root. It's just the part underneath the radical sign. And then the last part here, oh, there it is, b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so that's all we're going to look at. And whatever result you get there is going to tell us how many and what type of solution you have. So it could help us when we're solving the problem. We're going to fill this out, do this practice problem, and then we're going to kind of fill out the little chart afterwards to kind of tell you what it is. So, and this one, we've been marking A, B's, and C's now forever. So what is my A value, my B value, and my C value? Okay. So now all I'm concerned with, again, if I bring the formula up, okay, all I'm concerned with is the part underneath the radical here. So that's what I'm going to use. I'm just going to focus on that, b squared minus 4ac. Don't have to take the square root or anything. So my b value is -5. It's good. I've got a negative value here. And then minus 4 times a and times c. Well, a is 2 and c is 4. So let's do that math here. So 5 squared is 25, or -5 squared is 25. And then we've got 4 times 2 is 8, times 4 is 32. So when I do that, I end up getting -7 for my value of the discriminant. Okay, so we talked about that. That is our discriminant. Used to saying that word, discriminant. Okay, and so what that means is that, remember we talked about how that would be plugged up in here. Okay, remember we talked about how if we did all the work, doesn't matter what else we did, if you got a -7 under the square root, when we talked about what would happen, it would not work. You would get a big error message, error or can't do, whatever. So that's because our answer is no solution. We cannot have the square root of a negative number. Okay, so at least not yet. So what that means is our answer would be no solution if we got a negative value, any negative value for your discriminant. Okay, so let's look at the chart. Let's start down at the bottom because this is what we were talking about here. It's less than 0. So if it's less than 0, so in other words, it's a negative value. So if it's negative, then our answer is no solution. We don't have one. And then we can go ahead and make sure we put the line through, use our no solution symbol. Don't just put 0 because 0 is an actual solution. So put no solution. Let's work our way up from the bottom if the discriminant is equal to 0. Okay, if it's equal to 0, in this case, you're going to have one rational solution. So maybe an example would be if you had whatever you have in front, like 6 plus or minus the square root of 0 over something. Well, you'd have 6 plus 0 and 6 minus 0. It's going to be the same thing. So that's where we have that one rational solution. That's the double root, where if you factor that, you get the same answer there, one rational solution. And look at the top two. Both of these are if it is greater than 0. Okay, both of those are if it's greater than 0. So that means that both of these are positive cases. And if it's positive, we got two different things to look at. Is it a perfect square or is it not a perfect square? If it's a perfect square, so let's say it's positive and it's a perfect square root like 100 or 64 or 36. If that's the case, if it's a perfect square and positive, then we'll know we'll have two rational solutions. Those are my favorite kind because they factor out real nice, and you have an actual integer for your solution, and we know what it is. If it's not a perfect square, so like 5 or 62 or 304, those are not perfect squares. In that case, you'll still have two solutions, but they'll be the two irrational solutions where they didn't quite match up right on an integer, and this is between two numbers, and we don't know exactly what it is without completing the quadratic formula. When we did that, if we completed the work, we'd be able to figure out what those were. So those are your options. So let's do a couple practice problems and call it good. The big thing is to look at the directions. What are they asking for? It says find the number and type of solutions for each quadratic. So when you see that in the directions, you don't have to do the whole quadratic formula. You just have to do the discriminant. So if we look at our A's, B's, and C's here, what's my A value? What's my B? And what's my C? You guys should be saying 2, 4, and 2 for those answers. And now if I go ahead and go B squared minus 4AC, let's see what we get. In this case, my B value is 4, so it would be 4 squared. I like to use parentheses. It helps me keep negatives and positives set. There's 4 times 2 times 2. Okay, so in this case, 4 squared is going to be 16. And then here I've got 4 times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, so I'm going to have 16 minus 16, which is going to give us 0. So 0 for our discriminant, that's going to tell us that we have one rational solution, if you remember from our table. Okay, just by doing that simple math in front of it. So we're not doing anything else but that part. Okay, let's skip this one and go to, let's try this one here. Okay. Okay, so let's do this one, and let's go with A's, B's, and C's, because that helps us get our numbers all where we need to get them. A value is 1 here, B value -5, C value -2. Okay, so again, B squared minus 4AC, this is the discriminant, it's the only part we're focused on. I'm going to use parentheses here to put them in. -5 squared minus 4 times A and C. A is 1, C is -2. All right, let's make sure we're careful with our negatives. -5 squared will be 25. And over here, we're going to get 4 times 1 is 4. And we've got a -2, so that's going to be a positive 8. -4 and -2 would be positive 8. So together, this is going to be equal to 33. So 33 is positive, but it's not a perfect square. So our answer here then would be, because it's 33, positive but not perfect square, then our answer here would be 2 irrational roots. So it's not going to be perfectly, if we graphed it, it wouldn't be perfect on an integer. 2 irrational roots or solutions. Okay? So simply finding this discriminant, seeing what it is, will help us get some solutions. So that's our lesson summary. How can thinking about the discriminant help as you're solving using the quadratic formula? What can, just by seeing that value, can it help us with things with the quadratic formula? And how does that help? And then finally, the practice problem here is how many and what type of solution does the equation y equals 4x squared plus 4x minus 1 have? Again, we're asking how many and what type. That means we don't have to solve, we're using the quadratic formula. Don't have to do all the work, you're just looking at that discriminant. Okay? hopefully that was nice and painless for us. And that's it for today.